Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I'm going to take on a beautiful spinning reel. Very dirty, in need of some service, but other than that, this one rides fine and performs well. I'm kind of curious who the manufacturer is. So this is a Bass Pro Shop Pro Qualifier 30 with 6 ball bearings in it. And boy, it sure looks like a Shimano reel, but I can't say for certain, so I won't. But at any rate, it's an interesting reel. We're going to take it apart. We're going to show you how to service this thing, clean it up a little bit, and get it out there fishing again. So we start by removing the exterior pieces and parts, and as I do that, I like to thank our first responders and essential personnel for everything they've been doing to keep us safe. Boy, we're over a year and a half into this now, and their regimen is totally exhausting. They truly are heroic efforts, and it's appreciated all around. Whether it's uniform services, medical fields, including the long-term and acute facilities, in addition to the hospitals, and all of the essential services, transit, teachers, as we head back to school. Everybody, thank you for doing what it is that you do to keep us safe. All right, took off the drag adjuster. You can pull the spool. Found out where one of the ball bearings is. It's a spool bearing sitting on our axle shaft here. We can pull that whole assembly now. This should just come up. There's a small bearing. I'm going to put that right back in the spool so I don't lose it. There's a spool bearing underneath that. Sits in the cavity. So let's make sure that it goes in there. And then we got two options. We can continue up top or we can start on the bottom. I'm going to choose to start on the bottom for the continuation of this. I've spun the handle. It appears to be a screw-in handle. I'll give it a try. It is. You can remove that by going in a clockwise manner. A clockwise manner is turning the screw away from you. You'll notice as I take these pieces and parts off that they're going into a parts tray. That's the bottom of a jug. And it's a convenient way for me to keep track of the pieces and parts that I take off. I take the bump guard off next. This is a beautiful little reel. I found this one at a flea market. I put it on the side as one of those reels that I need to get to. I haven't gotten to it yet, so I figured I'd do this while I had a little lapse in my schedule, and also because I'd like to give it a try. We've got a fall season coming up, and I'm going to hope that put some braid on it, see how it performs. Okay, we're a little bit stuck with that one. I'd like to go to a flat-bladed screwdriver if that's the case. There we go. I could say with certainty that this reel has not gotten its annual service in a few years. And things are tight. You need to be careful. You don't want to butterfly the slots. If you do, you'll got one shot basically. Have to replace the screw. So be patient. When I first got into this, I was told in order to be successful at this, you need to be patient and have a sense of humor. Those words of advice have survived a long time now. I'm laying out the screws on my deck here. I want to make sure that they're all the same length. I noticed that the short one there that I have on my table, that one's for the bump guard. The other three are okay, so I'm going to take those and put those into the tray. I'm kind of curious how this will set out here now. You pull that out. Be careful on these. Now in this case it has a little ridge on the inside of the case here that pulls out. Sometimes you have them hiding under here. There's a little hook. That's why I took the other three out before I attempted to remove this. That goes in my case, and yep, sure enough, we got one more screw under that bump guard. That bump guard is there to take the impact. If you slam your reel down, let's say you're on a pier and you hit the pier railing or something, that bump guard is there to shatter before the reel shatters. Well, it's sturdy, but I can already see one of the ball bearings inside there. And we're going to take that case off now. So we have the second ball bearing. We already found one in the screw there. I'm going to remove the axle shaft this way. You could have pulled the pieces here and taken off the rotor that way. You'd still have to remove the axle shaft. While I have that open, I'm going to give that a drink of oil on that exposed bearing. That's bearing number 2, for those keeping count. I'm going to remove the Phillips head screw from the bottom of the axle shaft and the crosswind block. And then we can pull the axle shaft out. That came out nice and easy. So we have old grease and oil there. You can see how dark it is. Cleans right up. It came out nice and easy. I always like that as a test, because what will happen is if that axle shaft is hard to pull out, then you probably have a bent axle shaft that's degrading the performance on the reel. That goes into my parts tray. This looks new inside, so it's a lot of dirt outside, looks new inside. We should be able to take the main gear out now. We did. There's a little sticky bearing on the back end here, which we'll take off. Also going to give that bearing a little drink of oil. I use a couple of different oils. Here's a Realex oil. I also use the Penn Precision wheel oil, shown here. I don't really have a preference for fishing reel oils. I just care that they are fishing reel oils. Very dry. It's been a long time since this is serviced. Those oils have evaporated. We have a traditional crosswind block. So if I was thinking it kind of looked like a Shimano Symmetry or the like, well, those are worm drive gears, so it's probably not Shimano manufacturing this reel. Again, I kind of wish I had a view into who's doing it. All of these pieces and parts are clean. I'm going to put them in a tray. We will grease them before we reinstall. I think I'm up top now. This looks like a 10 millimeter. All I have to do is find a wrench that looks like a 10 millimeter wrench. Probably should do this ahead of time, but I'm never quite sure which reel I'm going to be working on, and I'm never quite sure what the wrench is underneath. There we go. I knew it was here. Off camera, I have a whole set of these open-end and box wrenches. I just kind of have to sort through them, and unfortunately I probably have 15 reels in that box, and of course 15 wrenches in that box, and of course Murphy's Law says it'll be the 15th wrench you pick up. Alright, we took the nut off. There's no retention. There is a little clip underneath here holding that in. Our reel has a clutch assembly under here. Go ahead and remove those. Just looking on this, trying to figure out how that's going to go. I see the override in here. I'm not quite sure what we're going to see. This is a setup that's a little unfamiliar with me. I'm not quite sure how that clip is going to come out. So, kind of on new territory here. Put that out of the way so you get a better look at this. We're taking the 3 screws off the collar right now. I'm going to set them on the table just to make sure that they are the same size as well. This is a good place to tell you, take pictures along the way. You could wind up in some trouble if you're not taking pictures here. Alright, I just want to see if when I move this, if I can clear that. I can. So if I move this over so that the 2 tips are on the outside, I can pull this bearing structure and pinion gear out. At least theoretically I can. That is until I pull it a little too hard. Let's try that again. There we go. Alright, so we have an anti-reverse dog, or gear. Take that and set that down. Watch that little corner there. We have a ring underneath. This is the collar that will work on the inside of the anti-reverse gear. And this is the bearing. And this is the pinion gear. And everything's so clean here. You could, if you wanted to, make sure that you get all the old greases and oils out by using a soft brush like this one. You can use a toothbrush if If it's convenient for you, if you don't have a brush like that, go right ahead. All right, we're going to get a good amount of grease on here. So if you like these types of videos, if you like to see how reels are made, if you like to see how reels are serviced, well, I work on them all, and this channel essentially provides you with a view over my shoulder of how I work on the reels that customers bring in, or occasionally the ones that I find in flea markets and the like. And I would welcome you to watch this by subscribing. And if you subscribe, hit the notification button. That way, when you go for the notifications, you will find the ones that I publish, and I do publish frequently. So a question I get all the time is, should I oil the roller clutch? And the answer is no. They should be dry. They're friction-driven clutches, and you should not oil those. All right, we noticed when we took that off that the red side was up, so it's going back that way. And then we know that we had a little bit of a wing here where both were out of the way so that we could reinstall this. You want to align your pinion gear, and then you want to push in. And there's some clearance things that you got to work on. Next thing up then was the override for this. Line up your pieces, and this is where your pictures help. Now in this case, there's two studs here that you couldn't get this collar on any other way, but it's always good to notice. I'm taking pictures, of course, with the video camera, but use your cell phone, use your digital camera. Heck, use Polaroid or a traditional SLR if you want. It doesn't matter. Take it on film. Go get it processed somewhere. The idea is to have a backup plan. It's hard to find schematics for these chain store brands like Bass Pro. Like I said, I'd like to know who manufactured it. I don't know. It would give me a clue, but it doesn't really matter. Bass Pro reels are, by the most part, they're very dependable. I fish a couple of those. I have the Bass Pro Extreme, which is a short size reel, wide spool, short, compact, and keeps right up there with all the other ones that I fish. All right, we're going to take a paper towel now. Just put some Purple Power. It's a degreaser on there so I can get some of the grease off the case here. As I mentioned, it came in pretty dirty. I found it in a flea market. It's a question of, was it always dirty, or was it sitting on a table for a week or two or three, and that resulted in it being dirty? I don't know. But there's no sense in not taking the time to clean up the exterior of the reel as you're doing the internals. All right, we did the top part of this. We can go ahead and put the rotor back on. You want to inspect underneath. You want to make sure that that's clean. This one is. I'm going to put a drop of oil where that arm comes through. That's going to be the trip lever. And I'm going to go ahead and put this back on. Remember, you have a metal clip here. As I say that, I've just popped it out. Put that back in. And I like to start these by hand because I don't want to cross strip it as I'm putting it back on. Okay, almost done there. So if you have questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you're working on a reel, maybe you're stuck along the way, or maybe you got a problem with a reel, you just can't quite figure it out, leave them in the comments section. I'll be happy to try and answer them for you. One of your questions might be, why didn't I oil that bearing up top? And the answer is because I forgot. I'm going to grab an oiler with a little metal tip, and here's a trick. If you don't want to take all that off and you just want to get to that bearing and you know it's clean underneath and so on, you can turn your reel upside down, because you can just remember now when I built that stack, that bearing is the first piece in. Go ahead and do that and spin it a couple of times. Let the oil work in before you turn it upside down and let gravity do its thing. All right, I got a little bit here. We're a little shot of that to get the dirt off the side here. It's cleaning up nicely. It says this reel was made in Korea. I don't know by whom. I do know, we've seen Daiwa and some Shimano's and some others made over there. All right, we did the oiling on the case there. Next up then, we want to get that bearing that we've oiled and put that back in the case. So it just snaps in the case like that. That's your back bearing, and you can oil it. I like to take them out and inspect them. If you know that all the things are working fine, you want to leave it in the case and just oil it that way you can. Also, from an interval service, you can just pull that button off the other side there, that case cap, and you can just put a squirt of oil in there that way. All right, the teeth check out fine on both the front and the back drives. I want to make sure that I get oil on both. We also mentioned we have a small crosswind block here. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to check the teeth, make sure that there's uniformity in them, that they're not bent or cracked. Get some on the front end of this. Crosswind block gets it everywhere. It gets it on the back because it's going to ride along the case. Gets it inside the little hole for the stud there. Gets it on the teeth because it's going to work with the main gear. Gets it on the face because the crosswind gear is going to drive the crosswind block, which is going to run up and down. This is our crosswind block. That's next. We get oil onto the back side of this one. Remember which way it goes. If you had a question, go back and look at your pictures. In this case, it's kind of the cheat sheet. It sits up like this, and that will set you up. Next up then, you're going to take your main gear and insert that in. And now you can reinstall that axle shaft. And on the axle shaft, I did put the screw for the crosswind block in there so I didn't lose it. It's certainly appropriate that you can go ahead and put that screw in the parts tray with everything else, but I do find that there's an awful lot of little screws in some reels, and to the extent that I can go in and just isolate one like this one, putting it on the piece where it belongs, it's one less that I have to guess at later. So I'm working on a flea market reel that I found at the moment, but if you have a reel that needs to be serviced and you're not up for servicing it yourself, and you would like me to do that, please send me an email, and I emphasize an email, on the business card that follows. I do get some folks that like to call a number on the business card, and quite honestly, that gets a secondary. I do try to answer all emails and the comments from YouTube and the like in the morning before I get started in the shop. When that phone starts to ring and I'm in the middle of a video or in the middle of a repair, I can't answer it, so it generally will trip to voice messaging. And when it trips over there, well, unfortunately, that's the end of the day or the next day before I can really get to answer that. So a email is preferred. That will get you your answer faster than the other ways. All right, we're going to tighten the 4 of those screws, which we know are the same. I'm going to alternate them. I'm going to go on an X pattern here so that I keep equal tension on the side case. And then we'll complete the lower assembly, and we'll come on up top. We'll look at what's in the drag washers. Right now, I'm liking the reel. I've seen 4 bearings so far. I'm going to assume I have a bearing in the line roller and probably a bearing in the handle, which would, not in the handle. I'm going to bet that they're going to count that roller clutch as a bearing. So we'll say that 1, 2, 3, 4, spool bearing 5, roller clutch 6. Nice. I just did a video on a reel called the Runkle Titan. It had 10 ball bearings. Interestingly enough, in my opinion, it only had 3 of them that were worthwhile, those being the 2 on the main gear and the 1 on the side of the pinion gear. The others to me were pretty much useless. They had 2 on a spool, they had 2 on a handle, and they had 2 on the line roller. Certainly will make life a little bit easier, but not necessary. All right, I'm just running a little bit of difficulty getting this one tightened. I keep bumping up against the little indent there. All right, we're in good shape with that. Now I have to put the bump guard on. Remember, that's slid outwards. So you kind of have to line it up so that the metal goes into the slots, then you push in. Go ahead and tighten that bump guard down. I like this bump guard. This bump guard is metal as opposed to some plastic bump guards. Well, bump guard is going to keep the pressure off the case if you whack it. The metal is not going to give way. The plastic ones will, but I like the metal idea here. The plastic ones I find fracture. They're exposed to the elements and they tend to fracture. All right, we said that there's probably a roller up here, so let's go ahead and put some oil onto that. I also like to oil the seams where the two bail arms meet. You do not need to oil, or you do not need to remove the bail unless the bail is not working. We're going to go ahead and, this one's got a little dirt on it as well, might as well clean that off. Take your time. It's an annual service. If you're servicing your reel and you've decided you're going to set out all your tools and get to working on it, there's no rush. A lot of folks will do this in the off season. People ask me what the appropriate interval is for service, and my general answer is once a year. Now, if you fish the reel every day, go ahead and mid-season and take it apart and make sure that you have the appropriate oils and greases in there. But if you're fishing it on the weekends for the summer, it's getting out there 15, 20 trips, you can go the year. Don't worry about it. But when you do, take your time. There's no rush. Let's see what we have in here for washers. And we have hard washers. Those don't require anything. And generally speaking, in my mind, that's exactly what I would have expected to find in here. And the reason for that is you're buying, for lack of a better term, a department store reel. And the fellows and the gals and the fishermen, the fisherwomen, and everybody else that's buying fishing reels from that kind of environment likely is not going to be opening up and doing what I'm doing here, which is the service. You have hard washers. They tend to be a petroleum product, so they don't require lubrication. That's all good. And you want to build a reel like this for retail where it can pretty much go its own way without the need for any regimented service, because a lot of times these will be lightly fished, and you want to make sure that that your customer has got a reel that it can depend on, and in many cases does not require a lot of service. So for example, I've seen these reels from department stores or sporting goods stores or the like, and they have felt drag washers in there. Well, the felt washers are fine, but they need to stay oiled. Well, if your typical customer set is not going to be one that's going to be oiling reels, then I would be concerned, because that's going to be a failure point on the drag system. Drag system here, like it. It's nice. All right, we need to get up and get the spool back on. Remember, we had that spool bearing come off there, so we put it back into the spool, and you need to align for that. Let's tighten this down. It's got a little rubber ring on it. It's going to keep the water out of the drag system. It's also a positive. All right, let's give it a spin. Well, I'll tell you what. It's a nice little reel. Bass Pro Qualifier 30. 6-ball bearing reel. You've now seen how to take it apart, service it, and put it back together again. This one's ready to go fishing. It's going to have a second chance. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, please like it. Again, if you'd like to see more of these, please subscribe. Please stay safe, stay well, and have a great day. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.